Exactly. Okay. Kumlen and Ablak Gemara. We're up to the last block in Daf Chagigah, and we're concluding the whole Seder Moya today. The Gemara the Chavov of the Beis. We talked about that when the Maratza come into the Beis Hamikdash, we let them touch everything, and we just table them out to Yom Tov except the Shulchan. We don't want them touching the Shulchan because they're Matami the Shulchan, and we don't take it out because it has to be there all the time. So we asked, how come it's Matami the Shulchan? We know when it comes to wooden products, if it's meant to be stationary, Klietza Osur Lenachas is not Makabel Tumah. So we said, like the Shlokish, 3 times a year, they take it out and they will show it to the Eden and they'll say, Ruchi Baskan Lushnehamok, look how much David loves you. And that the way you took it off is the way it came back. Kisadure Kach Salukai. The way you put it up there fresh and hot and piping hot, same thing as when you removed it. So now the Gemara wants to know, what do you need that reason for? We're up to about 15 lines at the bottom of the page on Chavov on the base. But typically, why don't you just say simply, B'shum Tzipui, because it's coated with gold, so therefore the gold takes on now it's considered as if the table is made out of gold, and gold, when it comes to other products, gold is makabel tumah, even if it's stationary. It's only wooden product. We learn from the pasuk sak, it's mentioned wood there, but gold is makabel tumah. That's why the shul makabel tumah. So you don't need to say because 3 times a year they take it out. But now we learned, and in fact, maybe the Gemara is not so happy with saying 3 times a year. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe that's not good enough to make it considered something that's portable. So give a better answer. The table covered up now. How do you know that the cover takes over the whole, the essence of the table? Because we learned Hashulchan, the table, Dufkiri, a kind of a chair that folds and it's covered with leather. So that shrunk. Let's say if you covered it with marble, then it's no longer considered a table or dufki. It's not considered a stone table, and a stone table is not makabel too. But in other cases, we didn't completely cover it with the marble. You left a little hole there enough to put cups down. Then tummy, so it still has its original use as a table, so it's makabel tumah. Otherwise, it's considered stone. We see clearly from here, if it's coated with something, that takes over the identity of that particular product. Abuda says no, that's not sufficient. A little hole for a cup is not enough. You have to have a place there to be able to put down loaves of bread or something. The table is meant to be eaten on, so you have to have enough room to leave some food on it. But otherwise, if there's no room, the tzipui takes over. If you can tell me no, that shulchan, even with the tzipui, is different. Why? Because what's the material of the shulchan? It's made out of cedar wood, which is very chasher, very valuable. Therefore, it doesn't lose its identity by being coated with gold. The light bottle that makes sense. But the Shlakish Utaka makes a distinction what kind of material it is. He's asking, he's only talking about like cheap wood, made out of cheap wood, the cover takes over. But how about this? Yeah, the clay masmimis, other kind of wood, which is much more expensive than bati. It is not bottled. Then shapir makes sense. So the shulchan is considered chavav on the base, about 10 lines at the bottom. It makes sense then that we're trying to work out why do you need to say that the shulchan gets lifted from time to time, and that's why it's makabel tumah, because mobile say it's the cover. So you're going to tell me, so according to the Shlakish, the table itself is so chasher, just because it's coated with gold, the gold does not take over its identity. Makes sense. According to Rabbi Yechon, the Amr says, even if you have more expensive wood, the fact is, whatever is coated on top, that takes on the new identity, nami botli, and whatever's underneath it. He says, if it's not there anymore, is my iklamema, what are you going to say then? If you're going to say another answer, you know why we're here by the shulchan that the tzipui doesn't take over the identity, and because gold is makabel tumah even with stationary, but in the case of the shulchan, the gold does not take over. You know why? It does not sort of subsume the wooden part of the table. Because kan betzipui oimid, kan betzipui shein oimid. When do we say that tzipui takes over? If you nailed it in. So therefore it's permanent, and because you nailed it in and it's permanent, okay, so now that became the new cover of the table, not what's underneath it. But if it's a thing that was not nailed in, it has a temporary nature, does not take over. And by the shulchan, the gold that they coat on top did not get nailed in. If you can tell me, only if it's a permanent cover, it takes over. Here it's not permanent, and therefore when it comes to the shulchan, since the cover, the gold is not permanent. Therefore the gold does not take over the identity. And because it does not take over the identity, therefore the shulchan is a problem it's wood. And why is it Mekabel Tumah? And the only answer is given is because 3 times a year you would take it out. This very question was asked from Rabbi Yechon by the Shlagish. It didn't only apply to a cover that's permanent and but nailed in, or even if it's not permanent. And then he asked another question. The chayfa es levazvo, you have to also cover the sides, the top of the side, the rim. Even if it didn't cover any of the sides, it just covers the top is enough. Rabbi Yechon said, loishna makes absolutely no difference. B'tzipli oimid and v'loishna b'tzipli she'eina. If you have a cover, I don't care if you nailed it, you didn't nail it in. The cover takes over the identity. Loishna b'chayfa es levazvo, loishna she'eina chayfa levazvo. Makes no difference if you cover the rim around the table or not. So the question is then, the shulchan, why don't you just say the shulchan has a cover according to Rabbi Yechon, and that's why it's Mekabel Tumah, because it's considered a golden table, not a wooden table. So you want to know, shiny shulchan is different. The Rachmana Amar, the Rachmana Karya, the Torah refers to the shulchan and calls it wood. Because the pasuk says, the chsiv is in the pasuk, Yechezkel right, Hamizbeach eitz sholish amos goya, the mizbech, but it's not talking about the mizbech. The mizbech, the wooden 3 hamas high, but orka shtayim hamas, umikza oisav loy has corners, but orka v'kiroisav eitz, the length of the walls are wood. By dabri alai, zeh has shulchan of them. And I said, this is the table for Hashem. So we're talking about the shulchan, and he says eitz. So even though I use the word mizbech, we'll soon explain why we refer to it as mizbech when we're talking about the table. But it says by dabri alai zeh has shulchan hashalifna Hashem, and the Torah calls it eitz. So we see that if the Torah decides to call wood, then the Torah eights will never become buckled to the coating. So therefore, an eights, we know if it's standing in one place, it's stationary, it's not Mekabel Tumah. Must be the reason why it's Mekabel Tumah is because 3 times a year they would bring it out front and demonstrate to everybody. So as the Gemara now talking about this thing, let me ask a question. Pasach b'mizbeach, he starts talking about mizbeach, b'sayim b'shulchan, he concludes with a table. Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Shlokin, Rabbi will say, "Bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim." In other words, we're talking about the bech and we're talking about the table, and the table is also called wood. So we're just wondering why we start off talking about mizbech, and then for somehow or another we segue into the shulchan. Two different pieces of furniture. So Rabbi Yechon and Shlokin will say an important thing. Bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim mizbech mechaper ala adam. When the beis hamikdash is existing, the mizbeach atones for a person. You had a dinner there, you go to Beis Hamikdash, a carbon, whatever that he did. But so today, shulchan shel adam mechaper, the table that we eat on, and Rashi says at the top of the page, shulchan mechaper olav hachnosas archim. It's not just sitting by the table and eating and making a bracha. It's when you have guests at your table, and Tosfos at the top of the page says the godul koyach halagima, the power of eating. When you eat, it brings people together. So this is the foundation of Ahavas Yisrael. That's why it's so important to have Kedushin Mishul on Shabbos. Everybody sits together and they eat and brings out Achnus Yisrael. But that's what I mean when we say Shulchan Shel Adam Mechaper Lo, we mean Achnasas Arch. And we learn from this pasuk, starts with Mizbeach and ends with Shulchan. Says the Gemara, Kol HaKeli Shemig, says the Mishnah, all the Kelim is Migdash Yesh Lehem Shneim. They always had, ready in waiting. They had seconds and thirds. In case the first one was tummy, they could pull out the second one straight away. And then it says the 2 Mizbechai did not become tummy. It says 2 Mizbechai did not become tummy. Says the Gemara, so the Mizbeach Hazav and the Mizbeach Lachoshes were the only ones that did not become Tamei. The Mishnah says, why? Because they considered part of the ground. Shulchan did become Tamei, and that's why we told Amaratzim not to touch it. But the Mizbeach didn't matter because it's considered part of the ground. And the Chachamim said because it's coated. Now we're not sure what the Chachamim mean, we'll get to that in a minute. Mizbeach and Lachoshes, where do you see the Mizbeach is called ground? Mizbeach and Lachoshes, the receiver, it says, Mizbeach Adam Metasali, you should make me Mizbeach out of earth. So we see the Mizbeach itself referred to as part of the ground. So therefore, if it's part of the ground, it's not Mekabel Tumah. This is referring to the outer Mizbeach, then it says Mizbeach Hazav, the inner Mizbeach. How do you know that's referred to as ground? See what it says. Hamanoida. It says the Manoida and the Mizbechais, and this is what they took. The Kainim they took with them, and the Levim, Hamanoida, the Mizbechais. And it says Mizbechais in plural. So both Mizbeach have the same status. Iskish Mizbech Zelazah, we equate the two, and that well, just like the Mizbech HaChoshis is considered karka, so the Mizbech HaZav is considered karka, even though it was very small, and you could have easily lifted it up, but halachically it's considered like karka. Now the Chacham come along and said, Rabbi Lezer says the reason is because it's like karka, different than Kabbalah Tumah. Chacham say they are coded. So what do you mean exactly? What are they saying? Chacham, are they arguing with Rabbi Lezer and they're saying what that it is Makabel Tumah, or they're just giving another reason why it's not Makabel Tumah? Says the Gemara. So right now the Gemara thinks that they're agreeing with Rabbi Lezer. They're just giving another reason. But on the contrary, the reason that they're giving it's coated, that means it's coated with gold, so then it is Makabel Tumah. Or coated with copper, it is Makabel Tumah. Says the Gemara. Because they are covered, then mitamu surely should become tamei. Because if, let's say, it wasn't coated, we'll treat it like a wooden mizbech, and a wooden mizbech sitting on the ground. We listed before. Any kli ate ha'asul nachas that's not meant to be moved around. The mizbech didn't take out to show anybody, so then it's not makabel tumah. But now you tell me it's coated with gold, and therefore it should be makabel tumah. It's not a reason why it shouldn't. Says the money right. Ema say the Chum arguing. The Chacham mitami say the Chum hold that no. The Mizbech do become tamid nation, so because they are coated with gold and copper, therefore they are makabel tumah. That's one thing. The boys another way of looking at it is Rabbon and Rabbi Lezer. Rabbon saying to Rabbi Lezer, we agree with you in principle. The Mizbech and makabel tumah. But my data, what is your reason? Mishum the Mitzupin Mibdol Beto. Why do you have to bring a pasuk? Because Adama, as if to say, really the Mizbeach should be Makabel Tumah. The only reason why it isn't is because the pasuk says Adama. Why should it be Makabel Tumah? It's meant to stay in one place because it has a coating of gold and copper. Because it has a coating, therefore you think that it should take on the status of the coating. It should be like gold, and therefore it should be Makabel Tumah. Therefore you bring a pasuk, it isn't. You're not right. In this case here, the coating is bottled to the actual mizbech. So anyway, the mizbech is not makabel tumah because it's a kli eitza asul nachas. It's a wooden thing, a wooden structure that's meant to be in one position, and the coating doesn't disturb us at all. So Gemara says, "My data. What's the reason you have to give an additional reason why the mizbech is not makabel tumah? Because it's coated. Mivtul bottled. I want you to know that it's a bottled to the mizbech. They're totally bottled to Mizbeach. Why? Because the Torah calls them Mizbeach 8. And because the Torah calls them Mizbeach 8, everything there is called wood. So the Torah, as if the Torah is saying, even though it's coated, it's still essentially made out of wood. Amar Rav Lazar, Tamid Chachamim, when that Rabbi Lazar holds that Tamid Chacham ain ud shel Gehenim shel letzes ben. The fire of Gehenim has no effect on them. They learn Gemara and everything else, and Torah and everything else. The fire of Gehenim has no effect on them. And how do I know that? That means even though they might have done Avedis and they deserve to be punished, Gehenim can't have a shlit on them. I learned that from the Salamandra. What exactly the Salamandra is, we don't know. Rashi says it's a chayah that's created from fire. What do you mean? The Salamandra is a fire that lasts for 7 days. We'll have it in Gemara Sanhedrin. It's a fire that lasts for seven years. And after 7 years, out of the fire comes out this little element. Well, in America, we have the salamanders, those red little worms. So this, whatever it is, it's a creature that is born out of fire. 7 years burning and born out of fire. The fire has to burn consistently for 7 years. And this salamander has the capacity, if you take its blood and cover yourself, it protects you from fire. Uma salamander should tool this salamander, which is born out of fire. Hasoch medam, if you take its blood and you smear yourself with it, ein ur shaletet, but fire has no effect over you. Talmud Chacham shekol gufaneish. It's not just covering yourself with fire. Your whole body, your whole being is fire. Why is that? Because you learn Torah, and when you learn Torah, it's internalized. And the Chsiva says, "Haloi koid vorai keish." My words, Abisha says, are like fire. Nu'um Hashem says Hashem. That means you have absorbed inside you fire, not just coated, superficially, but inside you have fire. So surely, kama, the fire of Gehenim cannot have any effect on you. Now, Reish Lakish over here. I'm just going to start it because I want to leave the last few lines for Tainas B'chayrim. But Reish Lakish says, he sort of argues, or he takes a step further. You say only a Talmud Chacham. I say, Ein ur shel Gehenim sheiletes b'Peish Yisrael. Forget about Talmud Chacham. Even a Peish Yisrael, even a Yid who does Averis, the Gehenim doesn't really have an effect in him. And Kal V'chomer from Mizbeach Hazah, from the golden Mizbeach, which has it's made out of wood essentially, a little thin golden sheet. And yet the fire burns on there all the time and nothing happens. So man mizbeach hadazov ain't had only a thin little wafer of gold. Kama shonim, and for years and years and years, you light a fire there all the time. Ein ha'urshalet is by the fire doesn't affect it. So poishe Yisro that are full of mitzvahs and they're even more special, fire doesn't affect it. So somebody wants to say the finish, the end, because but just before we do that, the Taisha says over here that Poishe Yisrael, the Gehenna, the Taisha says there are different degrees of Poishe. Remember in Rosh Hashanah Aleph, we talked about it. A certain Poishe Yisrael are in Gehenna forever, and others are there for 12 months, and others go down, never come back up. So Taisha says there are different degrees in Poishe Yisrael, and he says over here that here we're talking about. I'm not sure exactly how you define this, but the Poishek Tzas, people who sin a little bit. And then we're talking about people who sin a lot. Now, what's the definition of people who sin a little bit? Because in Tanya, the moment you sin, you're already a Russian. But I'm not sure what it means a little bit, unless you just do the normal thing that mainly you do mitzvahs, but you do some others. Then the Rish Lakish is saying the hand doesn't affect you. So which means that Rish Lakish seems to be arguing Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says only Tamil Nechama are protected. And Rish Lakish says that everyone is protected. If someone wants to finish, or if anybody's a b'chayr, save it as well for yourselves, as for Taina's b'chayr. Otherwise, I'll just tell you an interesting thing that many years ago, somebody went into the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Satmar Chassid, didn't have any children, and after many, many years of going to different Rebbes, including his own, and nothing happened, so he went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe with his wife, and the Rebbe gave him a bracha to have children, and then the Rebbe said to him, last week or 2 weeks ago was Chaf Aleph Kislev, which is a big day in the Satmar community. That's when the Satmar Rebbe was rescued from the jaws of the Holocaust, and and he makes a big kiddush, a big suda. So what was the Dvar Torah that he said? And the guy said it was Masechet Chagigah. We were just finishing Masechet Chagigah, and the question was, the Gemara, the Reish Lakish says over here that Poishe Yisro are Malayim mitzvahs kirimen, right? So and we had the Gemara in a few places. So so Satmar Rebbe asked, how can you say that the Malay Mrs. Karibin, the Poishe Yisrael? How can you even call them Malay Mrs. Karibin? And the Rebbe said that every time he learns, he told this chassid, every time he learns the Gemara, he has a similar question, but exactly the opposite. Since the Gemara acknowledges that every Yid is Malay Mrs. Karibin, how can the Gemara call them Poishe Yisrael? Anyhow, so that on that note, if nobody wants to finish it, we're finishing now Masechet Chagigah. We just finished the entire Seder Moed, and tomorrow we start Masechet Yevamos.
What's Mitzvah Shleimus? You want me to read?
Yeah, if you want to, go ahead.
The Chsiv Kepelach Harim and Rakosech, Al Tikri Rakosech, El Rekonin Sheboch, Lachas Kama V'Kama, Hadron Lochayim B'Kodesh Slichul Masechet Chagigah.
Everyone should care for hanging in there. I mean, believe it or not, we started at the beginning of January, this cycle, so this 2020, and we'll never forget it. That's right, it was a precursor to this whole experience that we've had, in this strange experience that we've had the last 2 years. So it's already 2 years and 3 months that we're into this thing, so we're almost a third of the way.
Are you able to say the difference between Rakoscha and Rakonin? Would that mess it up? Are you able to say the difference between Rakoscha and Rakonin?
What do you mean?
Al Tikre on the last line. Al Tikre Rakoscha.
One is Rakoscha means that your temple, the side of your face, and he's saying, instead of saying Kepelach Harim Rakoscha, that your temples are like a pomegranate, say Kosach, which means empty, that your empty ones full like a pomegranate.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.